14 buses today. We're getting word that it could be as many as 22. You know, this is a growing crisis, not just for the city of Chicago, but for the entire globe. The population shift that we are experiencing as a result of the failure of federal policies is now impacting the people of Chicago in a very dramatic way.
14 more buses carrying migrants arrived over the weekend here in Chicago. According to the latest numbers, more than 10,600 people are in city shelters now. 2,200 are temporarily staying at Chicago police stations.
Now, this is happening in all Democratic cities. You know, we're talking about Denver, Chicago, New York. Everywhere. They are all waking up to this reality that having an open border is a big, big problem. You know, if you haven't done so, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe. And we need to push this story because the more we talk about it, the more people realize that, hey, we are in a bad situation with this border crisis. And you need to be aware. Here's Nate, the lawyer, talking about what's going on in Chicago.
So the mayor of Chicago has been hospitalized for panic attacks. And the bus companies from Texas are now suing the city of Chicago for penalizing them because they dropped migrants off in Chicago. We got a lot to talk about. Okay, for those of you who don't know, Chicago calls itself a sanctuary city. Matter of fact, they go even farther. They call themselves a welcoming city, meaning that if you're a migrant coming from some other country, they welcome you with open arms.
Well, Ben and Lourdes, as you know, mayors past and present have referred to Chicago as a sanctuary city for immigrants. But today, amendments to the city's welcoming city ordinance, taking legal protections a step further, instituting policies to protect the due process rights of Chicago's immigrants.
Now, this was all well and good until the governor of Texas started busing and flying migrants to the city of Chicago.
Shout out to the governor of Texas. That was a great idea to wake people up because in words, it doesn't work. It doesn't register. Talking about 100,000 or 1,000 immigrants. But once you start seeing people.
Leaders from the city of Chicago are asking for help after another busload of migrants was sent there from Texas. They say so far this week, more than 60 busloads have made it to the Windy City. Officials there opening new shelters every week, but they say it's still not enough.
Then the sanctuary city of Chicago began declaring a state of emergency because they said they had too many migrants coming in.
This comes tonight as Chicago declares a state of emergency over the migrant crisis.
In fact, new arrivals coming late tonight as the mayor says more money is needed to handle the growing problem.
Now, there's obviously some hypocrisy here. The city of Chicago being a sanctuary city. Sanctuary from what? They were sanctuary from the federal government deporting them. So people then took them up on that offer of being a sanctuary city, and they had to declare a state of emergency because they didn't have enough money to take care of all the migrants that were coming.
And that's true for all sanctuary cities.
Now, the sanctuary city didn't really have any room for all these extra migrants and didn't have the money to take care of them. So migrants slept out on the street in tents and in police stations because there wasn't any room. So because Texas was busing migrants from the border to Chicago, Chicago decided to close its own border by making it very, very difficult for buses to drop off migrants. So they passed a whole bunch of laws to essentially penalize the bus companies for bringing migrants into Chicago.
And they did that in New York also, penalizing the buses.
Last month, City Council passed an ordinance aimed at discouraging these so-called rogue buses from dropping off migrants unannounced. The ordinance itself requires that the bus companies provide advance notice to the city when they plan to drop off passengers.
It's like sanctuary cities talked about it and said, and let's give this a try by giving the buses penalties.
The city, in turn, requires that the migrants be dropped off at the city's landing zone. Since the ordinance took effect, the city has filed 95 lawsuits against more than 24 bus companies it alleges has failed to comply. 2 buses have been impounded. One of them was an affiliate of Wind Transportation, which is now suing the city.
So the sanctuary city of Chicago doesn't want to give sanctuary to migrants. They're actually doing everything they can to close their border and to keep migrants out. And you can see this in polls now where the majority of Chicagoans want the city to end this sanctuary city designation. Here are the polls.
As more buses carrying migrants arrive every day, Chicago's designation as a sanctuary city is waning among likely voters, according to a new poll conducted by M3 Strategies.
A majority of Chicagoans prefer to end sanctuary city versus keep it.
Pollster Matt Wodorski says 46% of those polled said no more sanctuary city, 39% said Chicago should remain one, and 14% were unsure. Chicago residents were polled all over the city.
So with the polls leaning against staying a sanctuary city, some of the politicians said, hey, let's put it to a vote. Let the people decide if they want to keep Chicago a sanctuary city. But the city council said no, they do not want to ask the people because they're afraid of what the result may be.
While asylum seekers continue to come to Chicago from Texas in a move seen by some as an effort to embarrass or overburden sanctuary cities like Chicago, the fight to let voters weigh in on the sanctuary policy was shut down today.
Letting the buses in, again, is a wake-up call, making everybody a border city or a border state.
Repealing the ordinance will do nothing to stop the buses.
During a special city council meeting to put a non-binding referendum on the ballot in March, the mayor and his allies used a procedural move to prevent a vote on the referendum itself.
It is a shame that you all are scared. What are you scared of to let the people have a voice?
Now, the situation has gotten so bad that the mayor of Chicago started having panic attacks and had to be hospitalized. Here is what the reporter said happened.
I wonder if it's true.
Sit here and tape this. It's getting cold and snowy in Chicago, and Brandon Johnson has got his hands full to deal with that. But you've seen it. You have seen people, your community starting.
No amount of antidepressants can cure him of this problem.
No, he certainly was feeling the malaise.
I know it's so true. And I actually, you brought it up. I was going to bring it up, and I thought,
panic attacks. The mayor's panic attacks? Oh, can we talk about that?
Yeah, can we talk about that? Because two sources told me that he has been in the hospital for these panic attacks, and he is stressed out because this is a big job for him.
He wasn't ready for it.
He's not ready for it. He is not ready for it. He's not a leader. I'm sorry. He's just not a leader.
He's not.
And, a leader, brings people up and supports them. And the Chicago police are still waiting to see where that comes from. But yeah, he put in a good superintendent, but I still think that he needs to prove himself to the police. Where does he stand on that? But this immigration issue, boy, this is not helping him at all, this situation. And, when you call yourself a sanctuary city, you call yourself a sanctuary state, guess what's going to happen? Don't blame Texas, because Texas, if you look at what they're dealing with, they have a massive influx. We don't even show the videos on television. The amount of people that are just standing around, and now they're desperate, because what happens when people don't have money or they don't have food? They start breaking into things. They start committing crimes. They start working for the cartels. They start doing human trafficking.
Yep.
They start becoming victims of human trafficking.
Yep.
So they had to do, what are they going to do with all these people? They had to get them out of their city. And, sanctuary city, you're the welcoming city, so you're going to get what you asked for, or what you said you were.
So now the mayor has passed laws to stop the buses from coming in. He's impounded buses. They're arresting drivers. They're literally doing everything they can to stop migrants from coming into this.
New York City did the same thing, trying to put a stop to the buses and blaming the buses, giving tickets, and all of that.
Sanctuary city. So the bus companies now have fired back. They said enough is enough. Everything that the mayor's doing is not only illegal, but unconstitutional. Now, the bus company's lawsuit is pretty simple. It says that the city of Chicago overstepped by regulating immigration, regulating interstate commerce, and violated the equal rights and due process of the company and the migrants on the buses. Now, just to make it very simple, what the bus companies are saying is that, one, the city of Chicago does not have the authority to regulate interstate commerce or who comes in and out of Chicago. This is a free country, and the people who do regulate that is the federal government, not the city of Chicago. And then number two is the regulations that we heard about earlier only apply to buses that have migrants on them. So that's an equal protection violation. Why not apply to all buses? If you're specifically picking out buses that have migrants or could potentially have migrants, that violates the Equal Protection Clause of the United States, where everyone traveling through the United States, citizen or not, can travel freely. So by only targeting buses with migrants, you are violating the U.S. Constitution. Here is their lawyer laying it out for you.
It's unconstitutional for a number of reasons. So number one, what this ordinance does is it's really trying to address an immigration issue, right? And that's what we're seeing with the suburban ordinances as well. And when we're talking about immigration, that's a federal issue.
Mike Kozlowski is a Chicago-based attorney representing WIN. He also represents the bus companies who've been fined by the city. He told NBC5 Investigates Chicago's ordinance unfairly restricts business practices and targets only those carrying migrants, not other groups of people, which he says violates both the due process and equal protection clauses of the 14th Amendment.
The city's efforts, from what we can read, are simply to sort of mitigate that, right? To slow down the fire hydrant of people coming here. I mean, you can appreciate that, right?
I can appreciate that there are a lot of different voices in this debate, no question. But at the end of the day, the city has to operate within the confines of the law and within the confines of the Constitution.
Now, think about the irony here, that the Sanctuary of City of Chicago has passed laws to effectively stop migrants from coming in and has to be sued because they're violating the Constitution. Now, this case is important because Chicago's not the only city doing this. There are a whole bunch of cities who have now passed these anti-migrant ordinances to stop migrants from coming into the city.
New York?
New York has done it, for instance, and even the surrounding counties of both in Chicago and in New York. Check out this clip.
Migrant crisis, and for the first time, the mayors of our biggest cities are doing something about an issue that has been argued about in this country for decades.
New York Mayor Adams and other mayors now ordering new laws to help deal with an out-of-control asylum seeker crisis. The crisis paid for by local taxpayers, a crisis with no solutions from either political party.
Comes on the heels of discussions between the United States and Mexico to stem the flow of migrants. Darla Miles is here digging deeper. Darla.
Michelle and Bill, we are now more than 24 hours into a very short grace period issued by the city for these charter bus companies to get organized to comply with the executive order issued by Mayor Adams. He and his counterparts in other sanctuary cities say the new requirements for buses will bring order to the chaos, and anyone in violation when this grace period expires will essentially be breaking the law.
Now, in a shocking move, people don't realize New York City actually buses migrants to other places when they come. So, for instance, here, and the BBC is reporting, surprise, in Canada, as NYC buses migrants to the border. So they come over the Texas border, get sent to New York, and then New York buses them to Canada, right? So this is not about what actually works. This is about these sanctuary cities trying to keep the moral high ground. We're sanctuary cities, but when it really comes down to it, they are just like the governor of Texas. You have too many migrants, and what do? You ship them out. And
the governor of Texas is doing a great job shipping people all over the place. And we are in January. Today, January 25th. By the time election season comes around, it's going to be bonkers how many migrants are going to be flooding these cities. So this is going to be crazy, Just in January, and they're already complaining, and everybody's breaking down, saying this is too much, we can't handle this. This should be a game changer, and people got to vote in the reality of things. Like, I'm sorry, we don't have a good administration. They have no clue what they're doing, opening up the borders to everybody. But hey, that's my opinion. Write down what you think, and make sure to give this video a thumbs up and a subscribe, so we can keep expanding, giving you guys the message that this is chaotic. Again, by the time we get to November election time, hopefully people wake up and realize that this is just above and beyond the Call of Duty. Why are there so many migrants just flooding the streets and taking away regular people's services? And I just wanted to share that with you guys because more people need to wake up to the reality of things. See you on the next video. Peace.